At 12:07 a.m. on New Year's Day, a boy I had never seen before knocked on my door in the middle of a snowstorm and told me I was his grandfather. He was shivering so hard his teeth clicked, lips cracked raw. A thin hoodie under a jacket that had lost its padding long ago. Shoes soaked through, laces dark with slush. He looked like he'd been walking for hours. But the part that stopped my hand on the deadbolt was not the cold. It was the way he said it. Not like a desperate kid trying his luck. Like a line he'd practiced until it sounded natural. Granddad. The streetlight behind him carved his face into pale planes and shadow. 15 or 16. Brown hair plastered to his forehead. A bruise blooming on his cheekbone. A cut on his chin that had been cleaned, not left a crust. His eyes, careful gray-blue, flicked past my shoulder into my hallway, taking inventory. "I'm sorry," he said, voice small. "I didn't know where else to go." Then quieter, like he was ashamed of it. "Mom said you'd slam the door, but I had to try." My throat tightened on reflex. It does not matter how old you are or how many winters you've seen. A hungry boy on your porch on New Year's can still reach inside you and grab something soft. The problem was, New Year's had already taken everything soft in me and twisted it. My son and my daughter had abandoned me that night. They promised they were coming. They called early, both of them, as if checking a box. "Keep the roast warm, Dad. The kids are excited. We'll do the countdown together like we used to when their mother was alive." I set the table anyway. 2 extra place settings. The good plates. Candles my wife loved, and I hated myself for lighting because candles are for people who expect warmth to arrive. At 10:18 p.m., my daughter texted that they were running late. At 11:04 p.m., my son stopped answering. At 11:57, I stood in my kitchen with the television counting down and the roast drying out and the candle flames trembling like they were afraid. At midnight, the ball dropped in Times Square. Strangers cheered on my screen. I sat alone, hands folded on the table, listening to the tick of the clock and the wind rattle the windows. And 7 minutes into the new year, a boy I'd never met called me Granddad and stared past me into my house like he belonged there. If you have children who still come home, if family still answers when you call, don't waste that. Life is a thief, and it does not care what you believed would last. And if you're reading this on a night when you feel alone, remember what I did next. A door can open into warmth, or it can open into a trap. The difference is whether you stay awake. My name is Peter Hole. I am 68 years old. I have lived in this house for 42 years, on land my father bought when he came back from the war with nothing but a duffel bag and a stubborn heart. That land is not just dirt. It is memory. My wife's laughter in the garden, my children's footprints in the mud, my father's hand on my shoulder when he told me, "This is yours, but only if you keep it." I kept it. I paid off every debt. I registered every deed and title the hard way. I kept the paperwork in a steel file cabinet in my study and in a firebox bolted to the floor. Land is the kind of thing people smile at you while they plan how to take it. I thought my own children would be the last ones to plan that. After my wife died 5 years ago, they came around for a while, then less and less, like visiting me was a chore they could postpone until there was a will reading. My daughter, Ellen, married a man who always spoke like he was doing you a favor by sharing the air. My son, Mark, could be charming when he wanted something and distant when he didn't. I saw the change and told myself it was grief, busy lives, anything but what it might really be, hunger. I opened the inner door only enough to keep the chain taut. Cold rushed in and the boy flinched like it slapped him. "What did you say?" I asked. He lifted his hands slowly, palms out, like he'd been taught how to look harmless. "I'm your grandson," he said. "My name is—" A fraction of a hesitation. "My name is Ryan." Hesitation can mean fear. It can also mean you forgot your line. "My daughter doesn't have a son named Ryan," I said. His eyes flicked down and up again. I'm I'm Mark's, he whispered. He doesn't talk about me. That landed like a punch. For a moment, I saw my son at 25, handsome and grinning, swearing he didn't want to be tied down. For a moment, I heard my wife saying, "He'll come around. He's just lost." Mark is 41 now. A secret child was possible. But the boy's gaze kept drifting past my shoulder toward my study door, the one room I kept locked when strangers came by. "If you're Mark's," I said, "you know his middle name." "Thomas," he answered quickly. That was right. My stomach sank and something colder rose behind it. People don't stumble into true details by accident. "Mark doesn't answer," I said. "Ellen doesn't answer. And you appear on my porch 7 minutes into the new year claiming blood. That's a strange coincidence." His eyes finally met mine. Wet, trembling lip. "I didn't want to," he said, "but I had to. I've been sleeping at the bus station. I tried to call him and he told me to stop. He said if I ever showed up, he'd—" He stopped like he was afraid to say it. It was a good performance. He even let silence do some work. "Where's your mother?" I asked. "Gone." "Gone where?" He swallowed. "Dead." A blunt answer, not too detailed, the kind of answer you give when you don't want to get caught in specifics. The wind shoved snow sideways across the porch. His shoulders shook. My first instinct was to let him in. My second instinct was the one I learned the hard way. Pity is a lever, and levers are used by people who want to move you. I released the chain anyway, but I didn't step back. "Come in," I said. "But you do exactly what I tell you." He nodded too quickly. Inside, he stood dripping onto my rug and looked around like a man walking into a room he intended to own. "Shoe off," I said. He obeyed. Socks soaked, feet white with cold. "Kitchen," I said. "Sit at the table. Hands where I can see them." I carved the roast, warmed potatoes, set a glass of water in front of him. He ate fast, but not like a starving kid. Like someone who knew he should eat fast. I watched him and I watched my phone. I called Mark. Voicemail. I called Ellen. Voicemail. I sent a text. "Where are you?" And watched the screen like staring could force a reply. "If you're who you say you are," I said, "tell me Mark's favorite teacher in high school." He froze with food halfway to his mouth. "Mrs. Halprin," he said, a beat too late. Also right. There were only 2 ways this could happen. He was telling the truth, or someone had fed him facts. "Who told you where I live?" I asked. I found papers," he said. "What papers?" "Old mail, a box. I was staying with someone. A box of old mail that happened to contain my address, my son's middle name, and his favorite teacher." My suspicion hardened into shape. I excused myself into the hallway and called the one person who answered me every time. Nate Caldwell, retired deputy sheriff and my neighbor for 15 years, the only man besides me who still cleared his driveway before dawn out of habit. He picked up on the second ring. "Peter," he said. "Happy New Year." "It isn't," I said. "Listen, I have someone in my house. A kid. Says he's Mark's son." Silence. Then, "Is Mark there?" "No." Nate's voice dropped. "You want me over?" "Yes. Quiet." When I hung up, I stood with my back to the wall listening to the boy chew in my kitchen. He asked for a shower. I said later. I asked about the bruise. "Guys at the station," he said. "They wanted my bag." "What was in your bag?" "Nothing. Clothes." His backpack by the door looked too new for someone who'd been sleeping in a station. Not pristine, but not the frayed ruin most street kids dragged around. "Open it," I said. Inside, hoodie, socks, a cheap toothbrush, shampoo, and a rolled envelope. My eyes went straight to that envelope. "It's pictures," he said reluctantly. He pushed photographs across the table. Mark in his 20s, beer in hand. Mark with an unfamiliar woman. A baby. A 5-year-old boy who could plausibly become the teenager in front of me. The photos looked old. Worn edges. Yellowed lighting. But the paper itself was too clean. Too crisp. No writing on the back. No dates. Nothing. "Where did she die?" I asked again. "I don't know," he said. "I wasn't there." Careful. Vague. I gave him the couch, dry socks, blankets. I kept my voice neutral. If he was lying, I wanted him to think I was the easy old man he expected. Then I did what an easy old man would not do. I went to my bedroom, opened a lockbox under folded shirts, and turned on the cheap phone I kept for emergencies involving people I did not trust. Then I took a camera the size of a lighter from my coat pocket and set it on the top shelf in the hallway angled toward the living room and the study door. Another camera went in the kitchen corner facing the table. In the study, I opened my decoy cabinet, not the bolted firebox, not the real file cabinet, and slid a photocopy of a voided deed onto the top of a stack so it peeked out like a mistake. I left a pen nearby, cap off, like I'd been careless. I even left the desk drawer cracked an inch, the kind of invitation a thief reads as permission. Then I locked the study. I sat in my armchair in the dark, television muted, and watched the boy pretend to sleep. The house smelled faintly of roast and candle wax and old wood. Outside, the storm kept working at my windows like it wanted in too. At 1:13 a.m., his eyes opened. At 1:19 he sat up and moved barefoot toward the hallway. He tried the study handle. Locked. He leaned close, staring at the knob like he was considering whether to force it, then stepped back and looked around. His eyes went to the coat rack. His gaze lingered on jacket pockets. He wasn't looking for family photos. He was looking for keys. He took one step toward the rack and stopped, as if he sensed something. Then he returned to the couch. At 1:40, headlights swept across my front window. A car slowed, rolled past, then swept light again, slower. Someone was checking the house. I moved to the side window and peered through a gap in the curtains. A dark sedan idled at the curb. Passenger window lowered half an inch, just enough for someone to see without being seen. The boy on my couch was not alone. I wrapped my hand around the handle of my old cast-iron skillet. Not a weapon anyone expects, which is why it works. Then I walked into the living room and turned on a lamp. The boy's eyes snapped open. "You okay?" I asked, mild. He blinked hard. "Yeah, sorry. Nightmares." "About the station?" He nodded. "Do you have a phone?" I asked. He hesitated. "No." His backpack was 2 feet away. "All right," I said. "Go back to sleep." I left the lamp on. Predators prefer darkness. At 1:52 a.m., 3 hard raps hit my door. I stepped into the hallway and called out, "Who is it?" A man's voice, too smooth. "Sorry to bother you, sir. I'm looking for my nephew. He's a kid, might have come this way. We're worried." The boy sat up like he was about to run. I held up a hand, silent command, and looked through the peephole. A man in a wool cap, scarf up, face half hidden. Behind him the sedan idled, headlights off. "Name?" I asked through the door. Derek Manson." "I'll call the police," I said. "No," he said quickly, too quickly. "No need, we can handle it." His eyes flicked toward the lock, then tires on gravel, a truck turning into my driveway. Nate's truck. I opened the door not all the way, but enough to show I wasn't alone. Nate stepped up beside me, broad shoulders filling the frame, calm in the way that once made people cooperate before he ever raised his voice. "What's going on?" Nate asked. The man lifted his hands. "Just looking for my nephew." "You can look somewhere else," Nate said. "Leave." The man forced a smile, backed off the porch, and walked fast to the sedan. It rolled away without headlights for the first stretch, then turned them on like a mask. Inside, I locked the door. The boy stared at Nate with wide eyes. "That's not my uncle," he whispered. Nate's gaze pinned him. "Ryan, is it? You're going to tell us the truth, son. You walked into the wrong house for games." "I'm telling the truth," the boy said, tears gathering. "Then you won't mind if I call Mark Hole and ask him." Nate dialed. No answer. He dialed Ellen. No answer. Nate turned the phone screen toward him. "They don't answer. But that car came back twice. Someone knew you were here." "I don't know them," Ryan insisted. "Then you won't mind if we call the sheriff and have him keep you safe," Nate said. "No," Ryan said quickly, fear sharp now. "No, please, I can't go back." "Back where?" Nate asked. Silence. Nate waited. Silence is a tool. People talk to fill it. I made a decision that surprised even me. "Give him the shower," I told Nate. Nate frowned. Then he understood. Let him wash. Let him relax. Let him slip. "Bathroom," I told Ryan. 10 minutes. Door cracked. Backpack stays here. He obeyed, moving fast, like he was afraid I'd change my mind. When the water started, Nate said quietly, "He's bait." "I think he's a key," I said, "and someone's waiting to see if the lock turns." Nate leaned forward. "What do you have worth that?" I didn't like saying it. "Land deeds, titles, a will." Nate's expression turned hard. "Then we do it right." We got my attorney awake. We called the sheriff's office on the quiet line. Nate told them only what they needed. Possible attempted burglary, possible forgery, homeowner requesting a quiet response. We started building proof that didn't rely on my word against my son's charm, because Mark's gift had always been making people feel stupid for doubting him. When Ryan returned, hair wet, bruised darker, I put hot tea in front of him and kept my voice gentle. "If you're truly Mark's son," I said, "then there's something you should know. This land goes to my children unless I change that." His eyes flickered. Not joy. Calculation he tried to hide. "I don't want anything," he said too fast. "I just want family." "Tell me Mark's birthmark," I said. "He has one on his left shoulder. Shape." Ryan stared into the tea. Mouth opened, closed. He didn't know. There it was. The crack. Pressure makes liars defensive. I wanted him loose. "All right," I said softly. "Sleep. Tomorrow we sort it out." Nate and I watched in shifts, the house settling around us. At 3:06 a.m., the hallway camera blinked. Ryan was moving, toward the front door. He lifted the deadbolt with a familiarity that made my blood run cold, like he had already imagined it. He cracked the door an inch. Cold air knifed in. A shadow moved on the porch. A hand slipped into the gap. Nate was up like a wolf. He slammed the door shut, locked it, and braced his shoulder. Outside, someone cursed under their breath, then ran. The sedan's engine roared. Tires spit snow. Ryan stood frozen, eyes huge, mouth open like he'd been caught breathing. "Who are they?" I asked, low. He shook his head, but the shake was weak. Nate's voice turned into a quiet blade. "You don't get to play victim anymore. You almost opened the door for them." Ryan's face crumpled. For the first time, I believed his fear was real. "I didn't want them inside," he whispered. I was supposed to." "Supposed to what?" I demanded. He squeezed his eyes shut. "Get something. Papers." Nate didn't raise his voice. "Whose papers?" Ryan whispered, then said it like it burned. "Mark Hole. He sent me." The room tilted. Rage is ugly. Grief is worse. I turned away before he could see what my face was doing. Nate kept him talking. "How?" "He found me at the shelter," Ryan sobbed. "He said it was easy. He said you were old. You'd feel sorry. You'd change your will to me. He said I'd be taken care of." "And if I didn't?" I asked. Ryan wiped his face with shaking hands. Then I had to find the key. He said there might be copies in your study. He said you keep the real ones in a safe or firebox. You're homeless, I said, and he flinched. I was, he whispered. I still am. I do odd jobs, acting sometimes. He found me because I look like him when he was young. A visual weapon. Nate's jaw tightened. He threatened you. Ryan nodded. Said he'd make sure I got hurt. Said he'd tell people I was a snitch. Used as a tool. But Mark was the hand. Ryan, I said, do you want out from under him? He stared at us like he didn't believe anyone offered safety without a price. Then he whispered, yes. That was the moment the story turned from suspicion to war. I had something my son didn't expect. A witness inside his own plan. We set a trap with law and cameras. At 4:30 a.m., I called my attorney. Someone is trying to manipulate my will and steal my deeds, I said. My son may be involved. I need you and a deputy here after sunrise. After dawn, an unmarked deputy parked down the road. My attorney arrived, face tight. Nate placed more cameras, among books in the hallway, and his old dash cam on the porch sill pointed outward. My attorney offered to amend my will in a secure setting. I'm not amending anything, I said. I'm catching a thief. So we drafted bait, a fake will naming Ryan, plus sloppy language about land transfers. Just believable enough to thrill a greedy man. Then I practiced looking tired. I hated myself for that, but I did it. At 7:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I'm coming by later. Don't make this difficult. No name, no signature. But I knew my son's voice even without his words. I stared until the screen dimmed, then replied with one word. Okay. At 11:40 a.m., the sedan returned, brazen in daylight. A knock. I opened the door. Mark stood there, smiling as if he were bringing a pie. Dark coat, polished boots, hair styled, his eyes bright and cold. Behind him was a man I didn't recognize holding a briefcase. Mark's gaze slid past me into my living room and found Ryan on the couch. For a fraction of a second his smile faltered. Then it returned, wider. There you are, Mark said, stepping inside without waiting to be invited. He clapped Ryan on the shoulder like they were friends. Ryan flinched. Mark didn't care. Mark turned to me, arms open. Dad, Happy New Year. You didn't answer, I said. Phone issues, he lied smoothly. You know how it is. No, I said. I don't. Mark's smile tightened. Then he nodded at the man with the briefcase. This is Mr. Laird. He helps with estate planning. With everything. It's time we made sure your affairs are in order. There it was. The knife wrapped in velvet. Mark's eyes landed on the folder on my kitchen table. He picked it up and flipped it open as if it were already his. He scanned the first page. Satisfaction smoothed his face. He looked at Ryan. Good, he said softly. Very good. Then he looked at me. You really did it, he said, voice full of fake wonder. You're naming him. I forced my voice to stay thin. He's family. Mark's smile deepened. Exactly. Family. The way he said it made the word sound filthy. He leaned closer, lowering his voice like we were sharing a secret. Now we just need you to sign a few things. Mr. Laird will witness. We'll get the deeds updated so nobody can contest anything. Quick and clean. Mr. Laird opened his briefcase and laid out forms with smooth efficiency. Mr. Hole, this is a deed transfer authorization. Standard. I looked. It wasn't standard. It was an attempt to transfer my acreage into a holding company I didn't recognize. Whole Horizon Holdings. Mark had named it like it was destiny. This protects you, Mark said gently. If you get sick, we can manage things without court. The land needs someone. It needs me. Manage. Steal. He nodded toward Ryan. Tell him. Ryan's voice shook. I just want to belong. Mark nodded, pleased. You see? He needs you, and you need someone to carry your name. Perfect, he thought. A trap built from my loneliness. Mark leaned closer, voice dropping into that familiar tone he used when he wanted me to feel responsible for his choices. You know I can't do anything with my life if this land stays tangled, he said. You and Mom always acted like it was sacred, but it's just property. It's paperwork. Let me take the burden. The lie in that was sharp. He didn't want burden. He wanted control. He wanted the right to sell pieces of my father's sacrifice and call it moving on. He wanted to turn my loneliness into a signature. My attorney stepped into the kitchen then. Mark, he said calmly, Mr. Hole has counsel. Any signing will be done through me. Mark's smile vanished. What is this? Reality, my attorney said. Step back. Mark's eyes flicked to Nate in the hallway and drained slightly. He looked at Ryan, anger flashing. You told them. He took a step toward the boy. Nate moved between them. Don't. Mark forced a laugh. Dad, are you seriously letting your neighbor and your lawyer dictate your life? I met his eyes. No, I'm letting proof dictate it. Mark froze. What? I pressed the remote. The television, still muted from last night, flickered on. Footage filled the screen. Ryan testing the study door at 1:19 a.m. Ryan cracking my front door at 3:06. A shadow hand reaching in. Mark stared at the screen like it was a nightmare that had crawled out of his own head. Mr. Laird took a step back, face pale. You set me up, Mark spat. I protected myself, I said. From my son. He tore the fake will into pieces. Fine. I don't need your signature if I have the deeds. He lunged toward the hallway, toward the study, toward the bolted firebox he had never found. He slammed into the door, yanked the handle, then hit it with his shoulder. The door held. He turned, wild-eyed, searching for keys, and his gaze locked on my hunting coat. He grabbed for the pocket where my wife had stitched a hidden seam years ago. I moved without thinking. I swung the cast-iron skillet, not at his head, but at his wrist. Impact. A dull, brutal thud. Mark screamed and the keys clattered across the floor. You hit me, he gasped, clutching his wrist. I stopped you, I said, voice shaking with what it meant. The deputy entered then, summoned quietly from down the road. Nobody's leaving. Mark tried to pull charm on like a coat. Deputy, this is a family misunderstanding. We have attempted unlawful entry, conspiracy, and suspected forgery, the deputy said. Put your hands where I can see them. They cuffed Mark. They cuffed Mr. Laird, too, after the deputy found forged documents and a notary stamp in the briefcase. The deputy read Mark his rights while Mark stared at the floor like the words were an insult. Outside, another squad car arrived, then the sheriff himself. Statements were taken. My cameras were copied. The forged forms were bagged as evidence like dirty money. It didn't take long to connect the dots. The sedan outside, the attempted entry, the false nephew story, the holding company, the notary stamp, the timing on New Year's when everyone assumes nothing serious happens. As Mark was led out into the cold daylight, his polished boots crunching my snow, he looked back at me. No apology, only calculation. Ellen will hate you for this, he said. That hurt because it was probably true. Let her, I said. She already abandoned me. The door shut behind him. The house went quiet, like a candle snuffed. My attorney stayed long enough to build paper walls, emergency notices against any deed filings without my presence, alerts at the county clerk, an affidavit. It was paperwork, yes, but paperwork is how you keep your land when the thief wears a smile. Then it was just me, Nate, and Ryan. The adrenaline bled out of the rooms. My hands started to shake, not fear, just the delayed tremor of a body that had been holding itself still for hours. Nate put fresh coffee on without asking. He didn't give speeches. He just existed beside me, a quiet anchor, the kind of friend you realize you've been surviving with for years without admitting you needed it. Ryan sat at my table, shaking. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Did Mark pay you?" I asked. Ryan nodded. Cash to look convincing. More promised later. He told me what to say, how to cry. He threatened me. "Why agree?" I asked. He swallowed hard. "Because I was tired," he said. "Because when you're cold enough, you start believing you deserve whatever people do to you. Cold is cold. It just wears different clothes." "You're not my grandson," I said. Ryan flinched like I'd slapped him. "But you are a boy who needed help," I continued. "And you were used. That ends here." I packed him food and gave him my father's heavy wool coat. I told him Nate knew a church shelter, strict but fair, and if he wanted work, I had work. "I'll do anything," Ryan whispered. "Make it right by living better," I told him. "That's how you repay a chance." That afternoon, Ellen finally called. Her name lit my screen like an accusation. "Dad," she said, "what is going on? Mark called me from jail." "Where were you last night?" I asked. Silence. "We were at my in-laws," she said, defensive. "It got late. The kids fell asleep. I didn't think—" "You didn't answer," I said. "And a boy showed up at my door claiming to be family, sent by Mark to steal my deeds. There are recordings, a deputy's report, forged transfers into his company." That's not possible," she breathed. "It happened," I said. "He said you were losing it," she whispered. Confused, paranoid. Of course he did. Paint the old man as unreliable so no one believes him when the theft begins. "If you want to speak to me again," I said, "you come here, look me in the eye, and you do not defend a man who tried to rob me, and you answer when I call." "Yes," she said, small. I hung up. Forgiveness without change is just permission. After the call, I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the dark window as if it could show me where my children had gone. It is a strange thing to realize that you can love someone and still need distance from them to survive. I had spent years swallowing small disappointments because swallowing felt easier than naming them. That night forced the name into my mouth. Betrayal. Over the next weeks, the case moved fast because the evidence was clean. The sedan, the attempted entry, the forged forms, Mr. Laird's stamp, the company filings, and messages from Mark with instructions and threats. Mark tried to claim I had invited him to help manage my affairs. He tried to paint me as confused. But the recordings showed his plan and his panic, and the briefcase showed intent. You can't charm your way out of a timestamp. Mark tried to bargain, tried to spin it as helping. He offered to plead to lesser charges if I would work with him. He sent messages through Ellen, through anyone who would listen, saying I was overreacting, that he was only trying to keep the land in the family. But the recording showed his plan, and the briefcase showed intent. The deputy had the attempted entry. The sheriff had the forged forms. My attorney had my statement in writing. You can't charm your way out of a timestamp. Mr. Laird lost his license and faced his own consequences. The county clerk placed alerts on my property records so no changes could be filed without my personal appearance and attorney verification. My land stayed mine. But what surprised me wasn't the legal outcome. It was what happened in my house. Ryan showed up the next morning at dawn wearing my father's coat. He stood in my driveway beside Nate, shoulders squared, looking like he didn't know whether he was allowed to exist. I handed him a shovel and pointed at the drifted snow. He worked until his hands shook, then kept working anyway. He didn't ask about the will. He didn't ask about money. He didn't hint about family. He asked where I wanted the wood stacked. He asked how to fix a fence post that had leaned for years. He asked if he could feed the chickens. The first time I handed him a tool, he held it like it mattered. like owning even a shovel was a kind of dignity. Nate drove him to the church shelter at night. In the mornings he came back early, before the sun had fully decided to rise, and he waited at the edge of my driveway until I stepped outside, like he needed permission to be present. He listened when I spoke, not like someone performing, but like someone hungry for instruction. One night, a week after the arrest, I found him in my kitchen staring at the family photos on the wall. My wife's smile. My children as toddlers. Mark at 10, missing a front tooth, holding a fish like a trophy. "He looked happy," Ryan whispered. "He was," I said. Ryan's voice broke. "Why did he turn like that?" I stared at my son's photograph. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But a man doesn't get to blame his hunger for the way he chooses to feed it." That spring, Ellen came to my house. Not rushed, not with excuses, alone. She stood on my porch the way Ryan had, but she wasn't shivering from cold. She was shivering from shame. "I'm sorry," she said, tears in her eyes. "I didn't believe you. I didn't answer. I let him tell me you were the problem." My heart wanted to fold and make the pain stop, but I'd learned the cost of softness without boundaries. "You hurt me," I said quietly, "by being absent and by choosing the story that made you comfortable." She nodded, crying openly. "I know." "If you want a relationship," I said, "it will be on new terms. You don't come here only when you want something. You answer when I call. You treat me like your father, not an obstacle." "Yes," she whispered. I stepped aside and let her in. Not healing, beginning. She didn't stay long that first visit. She helped wash dishes without being asked. She sat with me in the living room and listened to the quiet the way you listen to someone breathing in a hospital, afraid if you speak too loud you'll disturb what's fragile. When she left, she hugged me awkwardly, like she wasn't sure she still had the right. Mark never apologized. From jail, he sent one letter. 3 pages of blame. He called me ungrateful, cruel. He called Ryan a thief, as if he hadn't hired him to steal. The only honest sentence in that letter was the one Mark didn't mean to write honestly. "You ruined my plan." I stared at that line, then burned the letter until it was ash. Some nights, after the case started moving, I would wake before dawn and sit in my study with my hand on the bolted firebox, feeling the cold metal under my palm, and thinking about how close I'd come to losing more than papers. My wife used to tease me for guarding documents like they were gold. After she died, I kept her note tucked behind the official pages. A few lines of her handwriting telling me she loved me, that I had done my best, that I should not let grief turn me into a wallet for people who confused love with entitlement. I didn't show that note to anyone, not even Nate. It was her voice, and it was mine to keep. That summer I sat with my attorney and changed my will, not out of guilt, but clarity. I also did the unromantic work of protection, added locks, updated alarms, filed additional property fraud alerts, and made sure every copy of every critical document was where only I and my lawyer could reach it. I hated that I had to treat my own blood like a stranger, but the betrayal had already written that rule. I built a trust to keep the land intact. Strict conditions. No one could sell parcels off in anger or greed. No one could use it as a payday. The land would be worked, maintained, protected. Ellen would have a place in that future if she proved over time she valued more than money. And Ryan would not receive a sudden inheritance like Mark imagined. Instead, he would receive something harder and better. A path. Trade school. Apprenticeship payments. A small stipend tied to attendance and progress. A ladder, not a jackpot, because ladders teach you how to stand. The trust also protected him from what Mark had tried to make of him. If Ryan ever stumbled, he wouldn't lose everything at once. The support was structured to keep him learning, working, building. I made Nate trustee after I was gone, with my attorney as backup, because I trusted their bluntness more than anyone's sweetness. Ryan protested at first, said he didn't deserve anything. You don't get to decide your worth based on what desperate years taught you, I told him. You decide it based on what you do next. He cried in my kitchen that night, shoulders shaking, head bowed, and I didn't touch him. Sometimes the most respectful thing you can do is let a man have his tears without trying to manage them. In the months that followed, he showed me proof the way some people show you love. Attendance slips, passing grades, calloused hands, small repairs done without being asked. He learned to drive a nail straight and to speak up when something felt wrong. He learned that a future can be built one ordinary day at a time, if you keep showing up. The next New Year's Eve, my house was not quiet. Stew on the stove. Ellen came early with the kids and didn't check her watch once. Nate arrived with a pie and complained about my driveway like he always did. Ryan sat at my table, cleaned up, wearing a plain button-down like he was attending a service. His bruise from that first night was long gone, but I could still see the memory of it in the way he held his shoulders. At 11:59, the television counted down again. When midnight arrived, the room filled with simple sounds. A child laughing, Nate clearing his throat, Ellen whispering, "Happy New Year, Dad," like she meant it. Ryan looked at me and hesitated. Then he said quietly, "Thank you." I nodded once. After midnight, when the kids were distracted and Nate was arguing about something only Nate could argue about, I stepped onto my porch alone for a minute. The air bit my lungs the way it had the year before, but this time there was light behind me and sound in the rooms. I watched snow settle on the steps, quiet, patient, covering scuffs of boots in the places where someone had once tried to wedge a hand through my door. Snow doesn't erase. It hides until spring, and spring, if you let it, shows you what survived. Inside, I heard Ellen laugh at something one of the kids said. I heard Nate's chair scrape. I heard Ryan washing dishes without being told. Ordinary sounds. The kind you don't notice until you almost lose them. If you take anything from my story, take this. Predators don't always break your windows. Sometimes they knock politely, wearing a face you want to trust. Sometimes they share your last name. Sometimes they count on your loneliness like it's a lock they already own. Stay awake, ask for proof, trust carefully. But a lock can be changed, a door can be guarded, and a man can decide, even late in life, that his heart will not be used as a weapon against him ever again, not even by family. And that choice is always yours.
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales like this, hit subscribe.